Okay, so take a good look at this bowl. It's familiar, right? It's comforting. It's ramen. We see it absolutely everywhere, from a college student's late night snack to this high-end culinary masterpiece. But what if I told you that this bowl holds a history that is way more complex and frankly, more dramatic than you could ever imagine?
So you think you know this dish? Really? Well, we're about to put that to the test. Because the story of ramen, it's not just about noodles and broth. No, not at all. It's a story about the rise and fall of empires, about secret battles fought during the Cold War, and it's really about the soul of modern Japan itself.
I mean, seriously, what if this simple bowl of noodle soup was actually a casualty of a world war? An accidental weapon in a huge global ideological fight? And the key to unlocking Japan's entire journey through the 20th century? Today, we are unpacking the secret history of ramen.
What's so wild about ramen is how it's full of all these contradictions. Is it just cheap fuel for workers, or is it this gourmet, artisanal food? Is it a Chinese import, or is it a Japanese national icon? Is it the symbol of industrial speed, or is it a slow, handcrafted art form? The thing is, it's all of those things at once. And that's what makes this story so incredible.
All right, so where do we even begin? Well, the story doesn't start in Japan. We've actually got to go back to the late 19th century, to China, right as Japan was starting to open its doors to the rest of the world. So you have these Chinese tradesmen settling in Japan's new port cities, places like Yokohama and Nagasaki. And naturally, they brought their food with them. One of those dishes was a noodle soup they called ramen. But the Japanese gave it their own name, Nanking soba, which basically means Nanjing noodles. It was super simple, just hand-pulled noodles in a light, salty chicken broth, maybe some scallions. It was a taste of home for them, and for a while, it pretty much stayed within their own communities. But that didn't last long.
Okay, let's jump forward now to the early 20th century. This was a time of massive, radical change. Japan is racing to build an industrial empire, and this simple noodle soup, it's about to get a totally new name and a brand new, incredibly important job. As the soup started spreading outside of the Chinatowns, its name changed. It became Shina soba. Now here's the thing. Shina was an imperial-era term for China, and it was, let's just say, politically charged. It was loaded with the politics of Japan's growing dominance in Asia. So this wasn't just a name change, it was a total rebranding that reflected a huge shift, both in politics and in food culture. At the same time, Japan's cities were just exploding with factories, and those factories needed workers. So you have millions of people pouring in from the countryside. And what do they all need? Food that's cheap, filling, and fast. Shina soba was perfect. It was packed with salt, fat, and carbs from factory milled wheat. It became the essential fuel for the engine of Japan's new empire. But then, just as it became this fixture of city life, poof, it vanished. And here's where the story takes a really dramatic turn, because the war and its aftermath completely rewrite the fate of this humble bowl of noodles. As Japan geared up for total war, every single resource was tightly controlled. The 1942 Food Management Law was the death blow. It basically outlawed commercial restaurants and food stalls to save all the supplies for the military. So almost overnight, the sound of those noodle carts just went silent. Shina soba was gone. After Japan surrendered in 1945, the country was literally starving. Official food rations were nowhere near enough. This created a whole new world, the yami-ichi, the black markets, where you could get anything for a price. And right at this peak of desperation, a new ingredient arrives in Japan. These massive shipments of wheat flour from the United States. So where did a lot of that flour end up? You guessed it, in illegal black market ramen stalls, which suddenly became this lifeline, a vital source of calories for a hungry nation. So you might be thinking, oh, this was just a humanitarian effort, right? The US helping out. Well, not entirely. It turns out there was a hidden motive. This food aid wasn't just about feeding hungry people. It was about politics. And here's the kicker. U.S. leaders were terrified that all that hunger would lead to riots, maybe even push Japan towards its growing Communist Party. So by flooding the market with cheap wheat, they hoped to head off social unrest. And just like that, the very same bowl of noodles that had fueled an empire was reborn from the ashes of war to accidentally become a weapon in the Cold War. How wild is that? So from the back alleys of the black market, ramen was about to take its biggest leap yet. And not into fancier restaurants, no, but into every single kitchen in Japan. And it's all thanks to one man and one truly revolutionary idea. That man's name was Ando Momofuku. He was apparently haunted by the memory of seeing those long, desperate lines for black market ramen. He was determined to create a version that anyone, anywhere could make at home. So after tons of trial and error, he landed on this brilliant method. He flash-fried noodles that were already steamed and seasoned. This cooked them and dehydrated them perfectly. All you had to do was add hot water. He called it magic ramen, and yeah, it was about to change everything. And when I say change everything, I mean it. The growth was just staggering. By 1965, just a few years in, people in Japan were eating 2.5 billion servings a year. A decade after that, the number almost doubled. Instant ramen became a symbol of Japan's post-war economic miracle. It was fast, modern, and oh so convenient. Then, in 1971, cup noodle arrived, and it got its big break in the most unbelievable way. There was this televised 10-day-long hostage standoff way up in the freezing mountains. The police on the scene couldn't eat their lunches because they were frozen solid. So what did they eat to survive? Cup noodle. The entire country watched live on TV as the police were being fueled by this thing. I mean, you literally cannot buy that kind of publicity. But even as instant ramen was taking over the world, something else was happening in the background. That humble bowl of fresh ramen, well, it was about to get a major promotion. It was transforming from cheap fuel into a respected culinary craft. So in the 1970s, this social trend called datsusara started to emerge. It means something like salaryman escapee. You had these white-collar workers who were just sick of the rigid corporate life, so they quit their jobs to go be independent. And one of the most popular things for these rebels to do? Open a small, independent ramen shop. It became a symbol of freedom, of craftsmanship, a way of rejecting that whole corporate grind. By the time we get to the peak of the 1980s economic bubble, the ramen world had completely transformed. Check out this number, 400,000 yen. That was the starting monthly salary at a famous ramen shop back in 1989. That's double what a new college grad could expect to make at a huge corporation. Ramen chefs were becoming actual celebrities, and that simple bowl of noodles was now considered high art. And that brings us to the final chapter of the story, for now, anyway. This is where ramen goes from being a national obsession to a full-blown global superstar. Today, you can go from New York to Paris, from London to Dubai, and you will find dedicated ramen fans lining up around the block for that perfect bowl. It's become one of Japan's most successful cultural exports. It's more accessible, maybe more youthful than sushi, and it's become a global symbol of Japanese food culture. So the next time you're slurping down a bowl of ramen, just take a second and remember the insane journey it took to get to you. From the docks of 19th century Japan, to the factories of an empire, to the black markets of a defeated nation, and even into the hands of Cold War strategists. This is a food that carries the weight of history, which leaves us with just one question. What story will this bowl tell us next?